all of your hope. We get out of here, you in the shower sing.
This is Dystopia Now, a show where a comedian and an academic explore the philosophies and religions of Silicon Valley and the tech billionaires shaping our country, our world, and our future. I'm Kate Willett, and my co-host is Emil Torres.
That's when it suddenly hit me. Let's let the filthy billionaires all leave for Mars, 'cause we don't want them here. Electrified.
Hello, and welcome back to Dystopia Now. This is our 4th episode, and I am Kate Willett.
I'm Emil P. Torres.
And this week, there was some very big news in the world of tech that I am actually very excited to tell you about. There was an article in Wired magazine. Get ready for this. Okay. The ketamine-fueled psychedelic slumber parties that get tech execs back on track. We were talking about ketamine and Elon's use in our last episode, and oh boy, have they really iterated on that, as Silicon Valley likes to say. So this is from Wired earlier this week. Ketamine is helpful for getting one out of the negative frame of mind, Elon Musk told an interviewer last year. The unelected man currently gutting U.S. federal programs isn't the only one who thinks so. Wired spoke to the co-founders of an organization that offers ketamine-assisted leadership coaching. I just want to repeat that phrase for a second. Ketamine-assisted leadership coaching in the San Francisco Bay Area. The two
Brilliant.
speakers are identified by pseudonyms, which they selected for themselves. Arya Stone. I like that they put selected for themselves so that they're like, we would not select the pseudonym Arya Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, we would pick a much better pseudonym. We would just go with Ellen or something like that.
It's like the media didn't pick Big Balls. Like, just to
Yes.
be clear, that was the actual name that guy used. So.
Yeah. Maybe big balls. I love that. Okay, Arya Stone has a doctorate in psychology. Shuang is a spiritual coach. The conversation has been edited for length and clarity. Shuang. We fast-track coaching by really locking it in with the psychedelics. We deliver it to you on a cellular level. Arya Stone. With ketamine, there's a 24 to 48 hour window of optimization when people's brains are literally more neuroplastic, which is why it is a multi-day experience. Shuang. We call it an offsite, not a retreat, because we're not retreating from anything. We don't do them big, 9 or 10 clients, particularly due to the importance of confidentiality. Our clientele is primarily CEOs of Fortune 100 companies, CFOs, level founders of startups. All of them are in a pressure cooker. Arya Stone. Those kinds of leaders come, people who have achieved so much in their life that they're like, what's the next horizon? Because I've pretty much checked every box. So I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Shuang. Our offsite costs $2,600 for 3 days, plus a $350 fee for medical assessment and ketamine prescription. Meals are included, but transportation and lodging or not. Arya Stone. Over the course of a 3-day offsite in the Mission, in a beautiful open space with the tall ceilings, clients have 2 ketamine experiences. When you walk in, all of these backjack floor chairs are in the circle. In the center are candles. Put a rose on every seat and information about what to expect. Shuang. The vibes are witchy. The first day is about settling into radical experience, welcoming what's coming to us on ketamine. Our opening ceremony could include movement, dancing, getting into the body, or we might just talk to each other about what's alive for us. We have an intention setting session. I think that's enough. You get the point. But it just reminded me last week when we were talking about how these people, in addition to being some of the most psychotic Ayn Rand style sociopaths to have ever lived, are also trying to do this weird Bay Area hippie shit.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, look, I enjoy using substances with friends sometimes, like pretty regularly on in the summer, I'll go on a camping trip with some friends and, take a little mushrooms in the woods. Hopefully the police aren't listening to this podcast or whatever. And I also think that like ketamine circles where there's people treating depression, I think that's fine. What I'm making fun of specifically is the fact that they have turned this into a leadership offsite for tech executives. It's so lame. So
I like to ask the question, is this late capitalism?
yes.
There's so many examples. Like the LA fires. And almost immediately after, you could buy T-shirts with like, I survived the LA fires or something relating to that disaster. Is this late capitalism? Is this sort of like the monetizing ketamine use? Come be enlightened. You're in a pressure cooker as a CEO and so on. What you need to do is spend whatever it was, thousands of dollars to come to this.
$2,600 plus $350.
Yeah. So that's wild. Because we were talking the other day, poking fun at Musk's obvious misuse of ketamine. I don't know if people saw him at CPAC where he had the chainsaw. But,
I saw the picture of that.
There were periods during his talk which I masochistically tortured myself by watching in full, where he was basically incoherent. He sounded so high. It's frightening. You're exactly right. I mean, these people are classic sociopaths. I mean, look up the list of symptoms of sociopathy. And it is just not even ambiguous that these individuals exhibit all of the traits. In fact, there was a book published a couple years ago on Trump being a sociopath, authored by a whole bunch of psychiatrists. Part of the code of conduct for professional psychiatrists is that you don't diagnose someone you haven't seen as a patient.
Yeah.
And so these psychiatrists explicitly said, we're in such a dire situation politically in the US that we feel it's worth breaching this code of conduct in order to publicly state that it's absolutely unequivocal that Trump is a sociopath. And then, at least, I don't know, I guess at least Trump doesn't do drugs, but you combine that kind of sociopathy in Musk with, ketamine abuse.
Yeah.
And I don't know, some of the erratic behavior, the incoherent claims, the, delusional fantasies, some of this sort of starts to make sense.
Yeah, no, it's truly nuts. This week I am very excited about our guest, though.
Yes.
We are going to do an episode about surveillance with my longtime friend, Albert, who, in addition to being my friend, is an expert on surveillance. He has a nonprofit that sues the NYPD on a pretty regular basis called S.T.O.P, and I'll let you tell us more.
Yeah, so S.T.O.P stands for Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. Albert Fox Cahn is the founder of that and the executive director. He's also a practitioner in residence at NYU Law School's Information Law Institute and a fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's Carr Center for Human Rights Policy. And he's given talks at TED conferences and so on. I watched one just earlier today, which is extremely good, really fascinating. He's I think, a really important figure right now whose work focuses on a morally urgent issue, which is the development of mass surveillance technology, which affects everybody. And as we discuss in this episode, there seems to be a very good argument that this kind of mass surveillance that's being promoted right now by tech billionaires like Larry Ellison is incompatible with democracy.
Please enjoy this episode. Couple other things. Thank you so much to those who have given us a rating and review on iTunes. That really makes it look like people are listening to our brand new show, which we super, super appreciate. That's awesome. Also, thank you to the people who have commented or shared the show on YouTube. I think we're building a community around this show, which feels really great for us. We're excited to connect with other people who care about issues and perhaps maybe having a different future than the weird dystopia that these tech billionaires are imagining for us. We're a society of people who want to keep living on Earth, okay? This is a show for people who want to maintain their human bodies on planet Earth. And we're connecting with one another. Whether or not we engage in drug or ketamine usage, it doesn't matter. community for the sober and the partiers alike. But we also got our first Patreon subscriber this week, so I want to say thank you so much to Derek Lipkin. And if you like the show, if you have been listening to our first 4 episodes and you think that what we are bringing you is worthwhile, we would love if you would consider becoming a Patreon supporter for $5 a month. If you don't have a lot, for $20 a month. If you are a self-aware tech worker, there are costs associated, and we want to be able to keep going. We want to eventually be able to hire an editor. I mean, as much as I love listening to these fascinating conversations 45 times in a row, filling my brain with this information, it would be so great to have some help with editing. So I hope you consider becoming a Patreon supporter. We will do some bonus episodes. I will also be including the show notes with our sources there. And if you have any other ideas on the types of things that you would like to see us cover on Patreon, you can email us at dystopianowshow@gmail.com or comment on YouTube. I've been engaging with people there, and I will do that until people find the show that are trolls and start saying the thing that trolls generally say to me, Kate Willett, which is, "You look so fat and Titanic." So enjoy our conversation with Albert, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Hello, and welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today, Albert.
Thank you for having me.
So we wanted to talk to you about a topic that I know makes everyone feel incredibly relaxed, and we just wanted to have a really meditative episode for our guests to just chill out in the Trump administration. Surveillance, and specifically police surveillance, because this is just something that I think makes us all feel safer and happier, right?
Yeah, what could make you feel more warm and fuzzy? It's like a lovely blanket of the panopticon just wrapping around you with a stranglehold on your ability to protest and speak freely and have any basic civil rights.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, who really needs them? I feel like our world is going pretty well in the hands of our tech overlords, and I'm sure that they want what's best for us,
Always.
Yeah. So for this episode, you and I have talked about surveillance in the past on Reply Guys, but I thought it would be really interesting to have you come on to this show, because we've been looking at a lot of figures like Peter Thiel and Microsoft, Microsoft
Elon
is
Musk.
not a figure, Elon Musk, and we were thinking about, what's kind of a good way of thinking about how these people are impacting our daily lives, and one thing that came to my mind was absolutely surveillance. So I wanted to start by asking you, how do you think that Silicon Valley, and specifically CEOs, our broligarchs, as some will call them, how are they thinking about surveillance at this time?
I don't think they necessarily put in those terms. I just think they have this ravenous appetite for all the data they can get their hands on, and they view it as just indispensable to their business model. And it's only gotten worse, right? Because we had, of course, the early days of ad tech and the birth of surveillance capitalism, and then the metastasization of that into the social media landscape and all of the awful platforms that have utterly wrecked our political discourse. And then you emerge into this latest era of the AI investment boom, where suddenly there's this new demand for data as training data to build out these ever more sophisticated machine learning systems that really cannot function the way they're being designed without a huge amount of data input. So really, in every step of their business model, not only are we the product, but we are the fuel for the machine.
I relate because I'm also having a hard time functioning, so. But I guess, what are some things going on in the world of surveillance right now? Like, obviously, we all realize Twitter, X, if you will, is taking our data, but what's some of the surveillance happening that our listeners may not be as familiar with some of the new developments with regards to AI surveillance.
Yeah, and this is the moment in the conversation where I suggest that if you have a puppy, a kitten, something life-affirming that brings you joy in your nearby area, bring it closer to you, because this all gets bleak. In the current surveillance landscape, on the commercial side, there are the AI products I talked about. There's all the litigation right now targeting a lot of the leading large language models, accusing them of wholesale theft for misusing all of these protected works to create their models. You know, if there's a AI chatbot that's trying to tell a joke, the reason why it's half funny is because it stole the material from Kate, and the reason why it's only half funny is because it's terrible technology. We see that iteration of it. But where I tend to focus is the intersection of surveillance technology and government, and particularly state and local government. And there we see this just huge amount of money and a huge amount of information flowing into these companies from our communities, our tax dollars, our municipal databases. And there we're thinking about all of these new platforms that are being used for everything from supposedly preventing crime, so not actually, trying to optimize traffic and transit infrastructure, software that's meant to improve the state of utility performance, but even something as simple as swiping your Metro card if you're a New York City school kid. We revealed last week that there's actually a massive surveillance scheme behind the scenes where the MTA, the private contractor that runs the New York City transit fare payment system, and the Department of Education were tracking where every student Omni card was used in the city, every student bus pass, train pass, and creating this massive database to try to prevent fraud, all while tracking people without their consent and putting them in harm's way.
It's really horrible.
Give us a sense of just how ubiquitous this surveillance is. I mean, what sort of information might the government or some of these big corporations have about me as an individual who has a phone, searches the internet? Like, how much of this information do they have?
So it varies from community to community, right? Everything in the United States is hyper decentralized. It's at the state and local level primarily. So the answer is going to depend on where you live. But you walk out the front door, there might be a police camera system. There might be a company that has partnered with the local police department. Oftentimes they have these real-time crime centers where they'll take local camera feeds from businesses and feed it in. And not only is that capturing a video stream, but then you have artificial intelligence software being used on top of that, running facial recognition, running object detection to try to map out where people are walking around a city in order to create a log of people's movement. You have automated license plate readers that can track where you drive. You have the transit records I was talking about. You have basically an ability in cities like New York and cities that have invested in comparable levels of surveillance to track the movements of nearly every person within its boundaries. And that's before you get to our favorite personal tracking devices, our cell phones, where every free app we use is free because it's commodifying our data and selling it to the highest bidder. And oftentimes it's selling our location data. And that location data is sometimes sold to an advertiser who wants to sell you something really junky that you don't want. Those awful shoes that seem to follow you around the internet are following you because the advertisers have your data and their algorithm says, oh, we think they actually want that pair. But you also see that same location data, that same web data then being sold not just to law enforcement, not just to immigration officials, but to the Department of Defense. The military bought the location records for millions of people from a popular Muslim prayer time app a few years ago, using that to create a massive repository of the locations of Muslim users around the world. So the scale of this is just enormous. And when the government is buying this data, it's doing it not just for a handful of people, not just for hundreds of people, but for millions or tens of millions of people at a time. And there really are very few legal guardrails, especially when that information is being purchased rather than being taken with a warrant. And just on the examples of the potential harm, just very quickly, if you go to a protest, if you go to a abortion clinic, if you're going to a doctor who specializes in gender affirming care, if you're going to any sensitive site, if you're undocumented and worried about your location being tracked by ICE, these tools can be used to really quickly and easily monitor those movements in a way that historically never could be done by law enforcement.
To what extent is AI integrated in these surveillance systems? Is AI now being utilized all the time?
One of the things that comes up whenever we're talking about AI is what the heck do we mean by AI? A good example would be facial recognition. That is being deployed thousands of times a year in New York City. It's being used even more frequently by some smaller cities. That's a version of artificial intelligence as I would define it, but it's definitely not the general artificial intelligence that people talk about in some of these discussions looking at technology down the road. So I would say, yes, we have machine learning being used to automate different elements of government and in the process capture large amounts of data and potentially dramatically increase the risk of error and bias. And so with facial recognition, we know it's much more error prone for Black, Latina, Asian individuals. There are commercial facial recognition algorithms being used today that are 100 times more error prone for Black women than white men. And we see those sorts of biases replicated by other AI systems. We also see a lot of predictive policing software, which is the very name is a lie. When you look at machine learning, this is linear algebra. It is not a crystal ball. It is able to tell you a lot about the past, but it is not able to predict the future. And when companies claim it can, it's a lie. And with predictive policing software, what you see is cities spending millions in order to deploy software that essentially just math washes, tech washes the underlying racial bias in their policing. If there's a video source out there, police are feeding it into a facial recognition algorithm because you don't need a special camera in order to run a facial recognition search. You can do it on footage from bystander surveillance footage from someone's phone. You can do it on a regular CCTV camera. You can do it on drone footage, though it depends how far away the drone is. And so really, when we think about facial recognition being used in the law enforcement context, something we're trying to outlaw in New York City and New York State, and I think are going to be able to do later this year, it becomes this force multiplier for injustice because the facial recognition is biased, because it's broken, because it's error prone, and because it creates this capacity for officers to invade even more of our privacy. When I was a kid first protesting the NYPD,
Wow, brag. Okay.
All right, look, I was into democracy before it was cool. All right, I'm just saying, like I had the early cuts of it.
And I was into Barbie, filling myself with poisonous, toxic masculinity, eating disordered thinking. All right, look, I was not a woke 7-year-old in the way that you were. Yeah.
I was very much a Greenwich Village cliche growing up in Lower Manhattan, and my two hobbies were protesting the NYPD and building computers, which is how you grow up to become the head of an anti-surveillance org.
And I was a suburban basic bitch, and now I feel really bad about myself. We move on.
I'm glad I could pick up where Barbie left off.
Yeah.
No, so with those earlier protests, I remember the officers having these bulky camcorders. They were huge things. They were just pointing them at the faces of people in the crowd, just taking this footage. I just remember the slow, deliberate pan of the TARU officer, technical assistant response unit, and they were trying to collect all this videotape, but at the time that videotape was just kind of going into a vault, going into a warehouse. Nothing was being done with it. But now, because of facial recognition, you can take that same footage. You don't need the officer with the handheld camera because you just have the drones there at the protest, and you're able to potentially create a log of everyone who goes to a protest. Like, I was at a protest earlier today, I had the privilege of, leading several hundred people in chants of firing that Governor Hochul should fire Eric Adams and that she should, and that, he does not deserve to be mayor. And at that protest, there were dozens and dozens of officers, each of which had their body cameras on. You had cameras from all over the park. You had the drones flying overhead. And because of that, they didn't need the guys with the camcorders. There were so many cameras there that they probably were able to identify every person who was there, not just those of us who were speaking, which to me is really incompatible with a democracy. And, with a firm like Palantir, they're then taking that sort of data, that sort of facial recognition search, and then pairing it with more data that officers have. And this is particularly alarming when you think about their work with ICE. I need to be fact checked on this, but I do believe they had a multi-million-dollar contract with ICE previously.
I know that they did. Can I tell you how I know?
How do you know?
This is very cringe, but I think it really influenced my worldview for the next many years to come, including now. The source of my discomfort with tech bros. Okay, back when I lived in San Francisco, I dated this guy very briefly and very casually. And he was poly, married. I went on like a couple dates with him. And then I was just like, I don't really want to date someone poly. Like, that's fine, but whatever. Anyways, I continued to be friends with him. He and his wife ended up getting ready to have a baby. She gets pregnant with twins. And was talking to me about his schedule with what dating was going to be like after the birth of the twins. And I'm like, I think maybe like now isn't the time for Tinder. Like maybe, take a break because you're going to have like twin infants and your wife is probably going to need some help or whatever. And the dude tells me that I'm being extremely polyphobic. It's like being transphobic or homophobic. I'm like, you just need to take care of your kids. Like, I checked this with my other poly friends, and they're like, no, this is nothing to do with poly. He's just being a deadbeat dad. Like, we take care of our kids too. So I just want to say that to our poly community. I know that this guy is not representative of anything, but the punchline of this story is I did not know what this guy did for a living. We weren't really that close. I knew he was a tech worker, but I just didn't really care enough to dig into it further. I knew that he was like a pretty rich white guy who lived in a very expensive house in San Francisco, and whatever he did paid really well. I come to find out like a couple months after we stopped talking, because he was so mad that I was being polyphobic. He called me, the wife called me. They're like, yeah, like, who are you to tell us what we should take care of our kids? I'm like, I'm sorry. I don't know. It seemed like a good idea to just to take care of your newborn infants. Like, what do I know? I don't know. I'm sorry. But then I come to find out that this guy works for Palantir, building software for ICE. And he's telling me that he's like an oppressed white guy because his wife lets him fuck other ladies or whatever. And I'm like, you build software for ICE. You are not oppressed. Stop. So that's just, to me, was like so exemplary of the mentality of some of these people.
Wow.
Damn.
Yeah.
The lawyer in me wants to have so many disclaimers, but really, you know what?
Well, I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, no, I was like, I'm just going to silently nod, and whether people think that is me agreeing, you know what? That's on them.
Yeah.
So this might be a good moment to ask you, Albert, what exactly does Palantir do? I think a lot of people just maybe have heard the name and know that Peter Thiel has something to do with it, but aren't really familiar with what it's up to.
Yeah, so Palantir comes from a long line of products where tech bros have tried to make me hate my childhood love of Lord of the Rings by repurposing the terminology from a problematic but wonderful book, and then use as a way to rebrand authoritarianism. So Palantir in Lord of the Rings is this all-seeing eye, this orb that allows you to see all this stuff around the world, and that's what the company wants to do. It wants to be your all-seeing eye. And the way they do that is by basically allowing you to... the way they frame it roughly is like they're helping you more accurately and accessibly access your information. Because one of the big issues in large institutions is you have all this data and it's siloed off in different ways and you don't know how to get to it. And this lets you get to that data more efficiently, which could be really bland if you're talking about like IKEA trying to figure out where all the data is for all of its different unpronounceable kitchen sets. But it's much less benign when you're talking about the CIA creating kill lists for people targeted with drones. It's much less benign when you're talking about ICE contracts and things like that.
I am going to disagree with you on one point, which is that I don't think IKEA is benign. It has caused the end of several of my relationships.
All right.
It is,
Just to
it
be
is
clear,
tearing our families apart. But no, I understand where you're going.
my statements only reflect the banality and benign nature of the IKEA data warehouse, the shopping experience in the physical warehouse. That is its own psychological torture experience that has been developed in partnership with the CIA and other intelligence agencies.
Is that really true?
No. Sorry. I clearly do need more of the lawyer disclaimers.
Yeah. I thought, well, because you said the thing about the lawyer disclaimer, I thought that you were doing that.
No.
I'm obviously very gullible. I'm sorry.
As far as I know, the intelligence apparatus of this country played no role in the dissolution of those relationships. I apologize.
It seems like it is some MK Ultra shit in there, though. Like, IKEA does. I mean, the meatballs are really good, but okay. I wanted to bring up a way that been talking about surveillance being used in the U.S., which some might say is nowhere near as serious as warfare or even policing. But I think there's some tie-in. Let me read you this from The Nation magazine last month. Warren and Casey, as in the senators, also voiced concern about Kroger's partnership with Microsoft to install facial recognition technology in stores, which could be used to identify individual customers. When a shopper approaches the shelf, she would see a price calibrated specifically for her. The next shopper might pay a different amount based on their profile. Retailers could use shopper data to charge higher prices to those who can afford to pay more, but since stores do not have to disclose who is making pricing decisions or why, the senators worry that shoppers on a budget are particularly vulnerable. So, I mean, we're all used to security cameras in stores, but, you know, as companies, these tech companies develop their surveillance technology, and we see them being used in the service of capitalism to just make the most money possible. What do you think that future is going to look like?
I don't think it's the future. I think it's the present. So I had an article about this last year in Business Insider looking at what we call the rise of surveillance pricing. And I really want to call out the work of Zephyr Teachout.
I love her. She's amazing.
She's incredible. I will say that right now she's working on legislation that would outlaw this. I can't get into too much detail, but it's really exciting to be able to work with her and a number of other groups on that. And while the Kroger example using facial recognition is particularly visible and particularly invasive just because of the mechanics of the facial recognition software, the majority of this that we've seen documented already, it's not using our faces, it's using our phones. There was really damning research, for example, about the ways that Uber would allegedly charge people more when the battery on their phone was low, because they presumably knew people were desperate for that ride before the battery died. And so in that moment, we're willing to pay more. And of course, we've seen versions of this in the airline industry for years. Like, you sit in a seat and you could be sitting next to someone who pays literally 10, 20 times as much for that. One of the things that people need to understand, traditional coupons, traditional discounts, they were a way to figure out, okay, here's this more price sensitive consumer. We are going to give them this way to access additional savings by putting in a little work to clip the coupon. It's our way of offering a discount to some people, but not to others. But it was all about giving consumers options.
Yeah.
With this sort of surveillance pricing, you don't know when it's being done in the back end. You don't know when this is impacting you. And so really it's taking that choice away. Amazon, they deny that they engage in this sort of personalized pricing, but they change their pricing. It's just in a given week, it's probably millions of changes in pricing on different products across the Amazon store. It's constantly fluctuating. And there's so much potential for abuse that simply because these companies know so much about your psychology, your mood, your finances, oh, you got paid today and you're particularly happy and your birthday's coming up and you're planning this big thing, we'll make everything a little bit more expensive because we know you're gonna not blink. Oh, you're running low and you just bounce the check or something. Maybe we won't be as greedy. But like that level of price discrimination really just has no precedent in our commerce. And something that we really hope state lawmakers act quickly to address.
Where do you see us headed at this point? How dire is the situation? Is this kind of mass surveillance compatible with democracy, or at least with the flourishing of democracy?
In the long term, no. I don't think mass surveillance and healthy, open democracy are compatible in the long term. But Kate has probably heard me say a version of this before, but I always think that the American people will only do the right thing at the last possible moment. That we will always wait and wait and wait to take action against corporate greed, against these violations of civil rights, against these abuses. We will wait until waiting truly becomes impossible, intolerable. And that's when we move forward with additional legal protections, changes in just the political norms around enforcement by different regulators. I mean, right now we see the norms around rule of law being gutted. We see a lot of the safeguards against misconduct by governments and companies being torn to pieces. And my hope is that the pendulum will swing back and swing back hard in the other way, and that we will see a new wave of the sorts of protections that brought an end to the Gilded Age. I'm a huge history nerd, and I've been reading a lot about Teddy Roosevelt lately, and he was an awful, awful, awful figure in so many ways. Just such a exemplar of so many things that are wrong with American identity and American colonialism. But the way he pushed back against trust offers a fascinating model for how those in political power working with popular movements can actually push back against corporate power.
Do you feel hopeful about the situation? Because there is so much momentum right now towards developing and implementing these technologies. And I think at least part of that is driven by a kind of widespread view in Silicon Valley and maybe in parts of academia, which is this sort of techno-deterministic view that the development and use of these technologies is just inevitable. The fact is that we have these technologies. So we need to not just implement the legislation, but ensure that the legislation is never repealed. And so that is what's new about the situation. It's like every day there is an opportunity to repeal the legislation. So it is a constant battle moving forward forever.
But I would say that's not new. Like, we've seen that massive deregulatory drive going back to the Reagan administration, right? Yeah, and you've been, as soon as the ink was dry on a lot of the bedrock civil rights protections, environmental protections, health protections that we take for granted as being part of a regulated economy, we saw people working to try to dismantle them. So I don't think we will ever have a permanent victory that can't be repealed. But I've been thinking about these issues for a very, very, very long time. Like, we went over just how ridiculously nerdy I was as a kid. But like, I was thinking about mass surveillance issues in high school. And when a lot of people I knew thought they were just something out of sci-fi, and then founded this civil rights nonprofit 6 years ago, and people thought, why would anyone ever care enough about that to like focus on that? People would tell me, no, you're too out in the weeds. You got to think about something that's relevant to a lot of people. And so the fact that this situation has gone so bleak that it is top of mind for so many, for me, is the indispensable prerequisite for meaningful change. I don't think we could have seen a path forward towards mass mobilization, towards the sort of legislation, the sort of people power we need, the sort of engagement we need. I don't think we could have seen any of that without it getting this bleak. And so, and I think that, right now, one of the things that I have so much AI Schadenfreude. Like I have been saying that the emperor has no clothes on a lot of these AI products being rolled out for years, and just seeing company after company sheepishly admitting, oh yeah, so we built this thing and it's super expensive and it does something, but it seems to be something that no one actually wants, and we have no idea how to make money on it. Like we are in such an AI hype cycle, and that investment curve is dropping off real sharp. So I think there will always be people trying to make a buck off of our data and selling it to the highest, most authoritarian bidder. But I think that the particular AI, utopia vision has gotten a lot less attractive to a lot of people more recently.
All right, I'm going to ask you one last bonus question if you have time.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so you mentioned the panopticon at the beginning of the show. This question's a two-parter. One, for people who haven't heard that term before, what was that metaphor? And two, what do you think is the right metaphor for this time that we're living in now?
Okay, so the panopticon. Oh God, I believe it was Foucault. If it wasn't, I will lose my philosophy degree.
No, I think it was. I think you're right. Yeah.
And there was this metaphor of a prison where there was a single guard tower in the middle, and all the cells were open in this circle facing inward. So basically, that the prisoners were policed through constant surveillance and being constantly watched as a form of total control. When I think about modern day life, behind me there are a bunch of copies of 1984. I talk about George Orwell all the time, but I think that we aren't exactly following the path that Orwell had thought of for us. I think that the better metaphor might be in Brave New World and Huxley, where sure, we are able to access so much information, but so often our political discourse is being drowned out through just such a volume of lies that it's hard for people to actively engage in a functioning democratic process. And I think, the surveillance helps fuel that, especially when we're talking about the way that surveillance interferes with effective democratic discourse. When we see surveillance capitalism and social media driving us further apart, driving fringe ideologies to the forefront, and we see protests and political discourse being chilled by the threat of retaliation, that is something that I think we have to fight against, and have to fight against fast, because like we said, in the long term, it's not compatible with democracy, but in the short term, it becomes a very, very compelling campaign.
That makes sense. I remember the week after, or in the couple days after the CEO of United was shot, we all saw the pictures of allegedly Luigi Mangione, allegedly, but I thought some of them didn't even look that much like him. You're a lawyer. We don't know. This person hasn't had their trial yet, but it felt like putting all of that surveillance footage everywhere it felt like there was a message contained in it. Like, don't even think about this. You don't even have to be the guy. We'll find someone that looks like you if you even thought about it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, surveillance is about messaging safety, and it can't deliver it. We've known that for decades. Surveillance is a great way to capture videos of crimes and to have those on the evening news. It's a great way for people to feel less safe. But let's be absolutely crystal clear about this. If mass surveillance actually worked at stopping crime, then you couldn't have had someone shot dead like that in the middle of one of the most heavily surveilled neighborhoods of the most heavily surveilled city in the country. All the surveillance could do was find this one lead that led to an almost accidental arrest. But he wasn't arrested because the surveillance system worked. He was arrested because of all the ways it failed.
Well, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I know some of this information is scary, but hopefully, I don't know. Personally, I've found a level of empowerment and understanding more about the surveillance that's happening. It does give me a sense that there may be ways to push back on it, like your nonprofit is doing. Where can our listeners find your work?
So you can find us on the very subtly named stopspying.org. We're not at all, we're very clear on what we want to do. We want
Wait, should we do the spying or should we not do the spying? I'm unclear of your position. Yeah.
I know, it's not very nuanced. And you can also find us on your favorite surveillance capitalism platform under the username Stop Spying NY, as in Stop Spying New York. Follow me on whichever one of those soul-sucking platforms you'd like under the username Fox Cahn.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's wonderful.
Dystopia Now is a co-production of Emil Torres and Kate Willett. Our theme song is Hunger Strike by Emil Torres. We have no outside funding or advertising, so if you can become a contributor on Patreon, we deeply appreciate your help keeping the show going. We are a brand new podcast, so please rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice, and we'd love your help getting the word out. Thank you so much.